Keely. I'm 36 years old. In November of 2022, I was diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer. I had just had my second daughter, Totty. She was 3 or 4 weeks old. My older daughter, Polly, was 4, or just about to turn 4. Yeah. I was about 30 weeks pregnant, and I was just about to go on maternity leave. And one night I found a small lump about the size of a marble in my right breast. Didn't really think anything of it at the time because obviously I was pregnant. And I did contact my doctor and was told, it's probably a pregnancy thing, which is what I thought anyway. We'll keep an eye on it, that kind of thing. So no action, if you will.
I was concerned, yet I'm completely uneducated in that space, obviously being a bloke. Assumed it was something to do with pregnancy, a natural type of lump. The one thing that played on my mind was the BRCA1 mutation, obviously. Being predisposed to a higher chance of getting cancer was always something that lingered in our minds.
I found out that I had BRCA1 about 10 years prior when I was about 25. And since then I'd, been really meticulous, gotten screening every 6 months, alternate MRI and ultrasound. About 5 weeks later, I spontaneously went into labour at 35 weeks and had my daughter. Something about that, I think, at the end of the pregnancy and then my, milk coming in, that kind of thing, just completely kicked it off. It went from the size of a marble to the size of probably a golf ball within a period of about 5 weeks. So my daughter was in special care for a month when they started talking about sending her home, and I had this huge painful thing on the side of my breast. I thought, okay, I really should get this checked out now. I still didn't think that it would be anything. I thought it would be a pregnancy related thing or, mastitis, something like that. I'd been having all of my checks. I get 6 monthly surveillance. So I went and had an MRI, which I've done many, many, many times in the past. And when I left, the woman said to me, someone will be in contact with you in 24 hours. And I didn't think anything of it then. And so then I got a call from my surgeon the very next day. And I was like, okay, he doesn't usually call me directly. It's interesting. Which again, admittedly, at the time I was like, I feel like I was like on another planet. Like I can't believe now that I didn't pick up on any of this. So he said, okay, well, we'll send you to get a biopsy. Again, the speed at which they organised the biopsy should have probably told me something. It wasn't until I went to that appointment and the tone just sort of completely changed. The person that was performing, the doctor that was performing that biopsy, essentially, he was the first person that said to me, I think that this is cancer. And, it was a slap me in the face. I just, I couldn't believe it. I honestly, he was quite certain. And I thought, oh my God, how can he be so sure, and he said, it could be an infection, we'll pop a needle in there and we'll see if we can drain something out of it and that'll give us a lot of information. And, he did that and nothing came out. And the other nurse that was there was sort of holding my hand and she said, oh, I'm really sorry, there's still a chance that it's something else, So I remember called Josh, my partner, and I just completely lost it.
I think it was about an hour later she called and completely broke down, before she even spoke to me. So I knew something was wrong. I knew we hadn't got the results, mind you, but I knew something wasn't right. And that's when Keely explained that the radiologist was really worried.
It just hit me like a freight train that, I could actually have cancer.
Came back to it couldn't happen to us.
Yeah, so that was the start. I remember calling my surgeon's office, said, could you just put me out of my misery? And she said, we can see you, we'll see you tonight, if you want you can come after hours again. This should have told me something. We went in, it was like a 6 o'clock appointment. Obviously there was sort of no one there. We went in, we were in the waiting room and I could tell Josh was really nervous. He was way more nervous than me.
It was quite late and again I just thought, they'll just give us some decent news or, something around some surgery potentially, worst case. Again, living in this false world.
The receptionists at the office, and they're these beautiful women, but one of them had tears in her eyes, and she was sort of trying to make herself scarce, but I didn't notice it again until at the end, but Josh noticed it as soon as we went in because we'd taken the baby with us. We waited and we went in, to the surgeon's office, and I remember his exact words were, this is not a conversation I want to have with you because it's not a good one. We both cried, and, they gave us some time alone in the office.
And getting the diagnosis, I remember it, but I was just soul destroying. Again, this feeling of impending doom. I can't really explain that feeling, but it was just pure emotion. We had a newborn child in special care, a 4-year-old, 3-year-old at the time at home, and just we're on such a high, and then all we can start thinking of is, what if? What if, the kids don't have their mum? Life changes in a split instant.
So that was when I had my first PET scan, and I just had this terrible feeling the whole time. And I remember going to the office again. My mum took me, Josh was with the baby, and I threw up because I was so nervous. I was shaking. I was just beside myself because, not for the test itself, but what it might show, I suppose it's like intuition. And I knew that this tumour was big, and I knew that from the scans. I could feel it myself. I was in agony. It was about another 3 days, and Josh and I went to the oncologist. We went in, and she said, we'll do an exam and then we'll talk about the results. And I just said to her, please, we just need to know what the results are. Can you just tell us? And her words, which I also remember, like tattooed in my brain, were, your PET scan results were very worrying, and we strongly, suspect that you have metastatic breast cancer. And I don't, the sounds that I made, I don't even know where I went in that moment. I remember just crying for my babies. I just couldn't pull myself together. And I suppose when I eventually did, she explained that we would do some more testing and things, a biopsy perhaps. There was things showing in my bones and in my lungs. So we agreed that we would probably do some more testing, and she said that she would present my case to a multidisciplinary board that she was the chair of and get other people's opinions essentially as to what they thought it was.
I try to be calm and composed all the time. I couldn't hold it together. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't help but think of the kids. It was the worst moment of my life, easily.
I would say that was obviously one of the worst days, and we had to go home and tell our family, who were all sort of waiting here, wanting to know what was happening. And, the kids were here too, it's just a packed house.
And it's like burnt into my brain. Because I'm holding Toddy, she's, just out of the hospital, so small, and her and Josh walk in, and it's just horrible news. Sort of telling everyone what they had said, and just seeing the looks on their faces. So, it's me holding this beautiful little baby. And, the first thing Keely said to me was, look after my girls. So, just really, really difficult to watch her be so in pain and so scared as well. I actually bought us all, most of the women in our family, 5-year diaries for Christmas. My first and actual only entry into that diary was the day that we found out that she had terrible, terrible news and terrible cancer. And I just wrote, today I found out my sister is going to die. So
That 2-week period between diagnosis and starting treatment, thinking the worst straight away, knowing that Keely had cancer in her body and not doing anything about it for 2 weeks was a hard feeling. It felt like we should be banging doors down to say, start it now. Why are we waiting? Or we should do surgery. Get to this point where you almost think you know more than the oncologists and the experts, just through pure wanting to fix this thing. That 2 weeks felt like 4 months. It was excruciating, and we sort of had to snap out of it and put the kids first, distract ourselves importantly, to protect our own sort of mental health. But the sadness is just one thing I can't accurately describe. Nothing will get close to it. I didn't feel like the man of the house because the situation was completely out of my control. So I felt helpless. There was a lot of moments where I'd be crying often by myself, how I'm feeling, how terrified I am about going on without, the mother of our kids and, my best friend. And then you sort of catch yourself and, it's not about me, it's about the family, it's about Keely.
I didn't know which track to be on, do you know what I mean? Am I trying to come to terms with my fate here, or is there another possibility, And every time I would think, oh, there is another possibility, there's this other part of my brain saying, don't be an idiot. We didn't know what was going on. We had no proof that the cancer had spread. You can't really make that sort of diagnosis off of one PET scan. But I went and had a bronchoscopy, which is basically like a camera down your throat, and EBUS, which is where they go out through your, somewhere in there, trachea or something, and they take biopsies of the lymph nodes in your lungs and around your heart. And then they do this thing called a lung wash, which is exactly what it sounds like. They put this water in your lungs and wash them out. Anyway, I was awake for all of this. We did that. And they said, my doctor, I think she said there was a 2% chance maybe that it would be something else. They were really quite sure. And those test results came back negative for cancer. But they were also negative for anything else. So we were sort of in this space where, having been told that it's likely this, but then there's no proof there, it was super frustrating. Back to the multidisciplinary board, and my oncologist said, we have no proof, that this has spread. It's a suspicion, always that word, suspicion. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, they said, and pursue a curative approach, which at that time I was, so happy, thinking that, okay, so they're going to throw everything at it, they're going to offer me surgery, all that kind of thing. Because when I was told it was metastatic, they don't give, they don't give mastectomies to people that are metastatic. So I remember that being one of the hardest things when I asked about surgery, and she said, oh, we wouldn't offer surgery in this scenario. I just thought, God, there's not even any point. My first round of chemo was when Totty was 7 weeks old. I remember that I breastfed her for the last time. I had fed Polly for 3.5 years. So this was sort of one of the hardest things, I think, that having that taken away from us. Especially, she was premature and we'd been doing so well with it. I had loved my breastfeeding journey with Polly. I knew because I had cancer that a lot of things would be different for her in her first year, and I felt, really guilty about that. Initially, I did chemo every 2 weeks, a really strong chemo called AC, the Red Devil, people call it. So I did a dose dense AC, so I did it every 2 weeks for 4 rounds, so that took us 2 months. And then I did 15 weekly rounds of a different type of chemo. It did completely knock me for a 6, feeling like you don't have control of your body or your mind, just feeling so isolated, I suppose, because you can't explain to anyone how you're feeling. And obviously being postpartum as well, just what my body went through. I was diagnosed at the end of October and I finished chemo at the end of April. Unfortunately, the PET scans again were very confusing to them, and that again their suspicions basically had been renewed. All these things were showing up throughout my bones. The activity in my lungs had gotten worse. My primary tumour, all the activity in my breast and lymph nodes on that side was completely gone. So they were confused, essentially. We were all really, really confused. But what it meant was that my surgery was cancelled. And I was devastated because, you know, as I mentioned, being offered a mastectomy meant, you know, I was savable. And now that was being put on hold. So maybe I wasn't. People are pretty sure that this is metastatic cancer. We've seen this kind of thing, you know, rarely, but sometimes where the metastasis will mutate, really, I suppose, and stop responding to chemo. So you could have the primary cancer would respond, but these other things wouldn't. So that was a strong possibility. She said, or it could be this other thing called sarcoidosis, which is an autoimmune disease. And a few of the radiologists had mentioned it, you know, but again, it's very rare. And given that you already have cancer, that's the more likely diagnosis. My lungs were full of all this stuff, but as I explained before, we'd already checked my lungs and they weren't showing any cancer. So, okay, that was weird. The activity in my bones was only able to be picked up by a PET scan, which means it's metabolic change, not physiological change. There was actually no tumours for them to biopsy, but whatever it was in my pelvis had grown enough that, and it was in a spot that, you know, they thought, yes, we can get to that with the biopsy. And that turned out to be a huge blessing. The things had gotten worse, I suppose, because it forced us to look at it again. And this time, you know, we would be going for a definitive answer on exactly what was happening. So I went into hospital overnight, had a bone biopsy of my pelvis with no anaesthesia whatsoever. They gave me local, but you can't numb a bone. So I had local anaesthetic in the area, but once they get down to the bone, which is what they're going for, and they're trying to take the sample of the bone and the bone marrow, they can't numb that. And so it's essentially hammering this metal thing into your bone to break through to try and get the sample. All throughout this journey, I've sort of had feelings, you know, this is going to be a good thing, this is going to be a bad thing, good, bad, and started to sort of do my own research about sarcoidosis. And I noticed some things in my own body that I recognised. I had a really good feeling, but I didn't share it with anyone. I sort of, you know, didn't want to get everyone's hopes up, so I sort of kept it to myself. The way I found out was we had taken our youngest daughter to the GP for her vaccinations. So we were in the nurse's office, and I've got a beautiful GP. She's such a beautiful person, and we've known each other for years. And we were in with the nurse, the kids in the room, and Josh and me, and, you know, about to get these injections, and she comes flying through the door. Oh my God, that, you know, I can't believe it, you know, the results. And I said, what the F are you talking about? Like, we don't have the results. What are the results, you know? And she said, it's negative. There's nothing there. And I was like crying and shaking, and she ran out of the room again and said, hang on, I'll get the piece of paper. And, you know, she brought it back into me, and she'd highlighted there, no evidence of malignancy. And what they'd found was this certain type of cell, which essentially meant that it was sarcoidosis. What it meant was that there was no evidence that my cancer had spread anywhere beyond the primary tumour and those few lymph nodes nearby. And that completely changed my diagnosis. So when the bone biopsy came back negative, it was basically like a mad panic to get me this mastectomy that had been planned. Generally, they like to leave, you know, 3 weeks, maximum 6 weeks. Because I do have BRCA1 mutation and I had a very aggressive cancer, obviously the longer they leave your breasts there, the chances are it can come back. It's a very aggressive cancer, even if it's not completely dead, because the more steps you tick off in your treatment, like the closer you are, you know, to just seeing it in the rearview mirror. It's definitely not lost on me, you know, being given that information and then having the story change. It just gives you so much perspective.
It's been difficult. I feel like everyone's put their lives on hold, and, you know, I'd do it all over again 1,000 times, you know, just to support her, I guess.
So I had the surgery about 10 days ago, my double mastectomy with reconstruction. I don't know if I'm getting the results tomorrow. I hope I am. There was some confusion about whether I'd get them from the surgeon or the oncologist. So I've got the oncologist tomorrow and then the surgeon on Wednesday. So I'm really hoping I will get the results from one of those two people. Okay. Yeah, it was good. So we went in there and she was like, oh, so that's really great about the, the test results. And again, I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, that, yeah, I've had a pathological complete response, so I do not have cancer anymore. That's really weird to say. So she said that my cure rate now is 90%. So having gone from being told originally that essentially I was terminal to now I have a 90% survival rate. I need to do 3 weeks of radiation, no more chemo. And there was only one lymph node involved. So she said that she was so obviously happy as well. And, she's been there with us through everything and it's been crazy and I can't process it right now.
I was a bit teary in there because it was unexpected to a degree. We talked about preparing, for, I said,
we haven't often
case.
Gotten good news throughout this, have we? Like
it's been spattered. It's been up and down. So I'm wrapped.
The weirdest part was that she was like, I'll see you in like 4 to 6 months. And I was like, what do you mean? You're just like letting me go out into the world. And she's like, you don't have cancer. One of the things that we first talked about was on the way home now from the results was we are excited to, and so far in the future, but enjoy our retirement together, because one of the things that Josh said, I remember, was, what am I going to do when I'm old? And, will I be alone and lonely? And, but we get to do that together now. Mm-hmm. And that's in the far future. I know that I've got 3 to 5 years ahead of me before I can really say, it's gone for good. But yeah, I think it's funny, like we're day one, and the guilt is already crippling. I just was so many girls that I've met online in similar situations to me. I just want the same thing for them. And, one of them messaged me just before and said, how are you? And, and tell her the news, but I didn't want to hurt her. I did tell her and she was so happy for me, and I just said to her, I want the same thing for you, but yeah, that's all. I want the same thing for everyone. It's not realistic, but I know how lucky I am and I'll just help other people wherever I can.
I think part of that not taking life for granted is a legacy for others too that aren't as lucky as us. Yeah. They didn't get the chance to, enjoy their kids and, a worry-free life. We should also put that in our mind with enjoying our lives, making sure we do it for them as well. I think it's really important, and that awareness of that is powerful.
So I think I'll work through, how to deal with that as I move forward. And like I said, day one, I'll figure it out, I'm sure.